Good morning. Hi everyone. Pam here from Pam's Crafty Corner. Welcome back to my channel for another episode of Coffee, Crime, and Crafts. These are my bi-weekly episodes where I discuss the details of a specific crime while I'm working on a weekly craft project. Today, we're going to discuss a rather odd crime that occurred in Birmingham, Alabama in 1979. I'm not really sure how I first heard about this story, but it certainly piqued my interest. It's the story of a hand sticking out of the trunk of a vehicle as it drove along Interstate 59, weaving in and out of traffic for hours as police tried desperately to ascertain if the reports were true and to also locate the suspect vehicle. So grab your drink or your snack of choice, grab your craft project, and let's get to it. So today I have my dark roast coffee. I've got my camera set up above me. I hope the vantage point there is going to be okay. I'm going to be working on one of my larger cross-stitch pieces. Can't see much of it now because I've got it in my frame, but this is a piece called Folk Witch. I'll insert a picture of what it looks like up to this point. This is a kit that's produced by a company called Gecko Rouge in the UK. I'm stitching this for a lovely lady in England who got the kit, had never done a full coverage piece before, and got overwhelmed by it. Couldn't really get much done with it. She also had some pretty severe health issues, so I offered to stitch it for her. So I've been working on this for a couple of years now, and I'm getting down to the end. This is the very last corner of the project. It's being stitched on 25 count fabric, and I'm stitching it 1/1, and I'm using the floss that came with the kit, which is DMC. So it also came with this pre-gridded fabric, but I'm not using the grids. Where it was started, it's not matching up with the actual grid lines on the chart, so I'm just stitching it as if the grid lines weren't there, like a plain piece of Ada. So, let's get to it. I'll put my coffee down. Now I think I've got this set up so you should be able to see where I'm stitching here. I'm basically going to work on this section that's in between her shoes, where she's got her feet crossed over. I'm going to work on filling this section in. Okay. So, Saturday, May the 5th, 1979. That's when this event occurred. It started out just like any other Saturday, and you know, most people were off from work. People who were working, it started out like a regular work day. There was a group of reporters, though, that were working a news desk at the Birmingham News. And this particular Saturday was about to take a pretty exciting turn for them. Garland Reeves, he was the news editor, and he was listening to the police radio scanner that they kept in the newsroom, trying to get leads on potential breaking stories that could be covered by his news team. He heard that the police had received calls from members of the public reporting a human hand sticking out of the trunk of a beige or brown Dodge car that was traveling on the interstate highway. So Garland thought this was pretty odd at first, and he thought maybe it was a crank call for dispatch, that maybe someone was playing a prank. But he noticed that the police dispatchers were actually relaying all the details from a couple of different calls, and that it wasn't just a single crank call into the police about it. And so officers were now out looking for this suspect vehicle on the interstate. So Garland thought that this could maybe potentially lead to a good story. So he decided to task one of his news crews with going out and having a look around, see if they could come up with anything, so that they could be kind of in a position to be Johnny on the spot, if you will, when the police finally found this vehicle. So the news team that he chose to do this was a team that consisted of an intern who was working at the newspaper for the summer and a veteran photographer. So Mark Wynne, I think that's how he pronounces his surname. It could be Winnie, but I think it's actually just Wynne, W-I-N-N-E. So Mark Wynne was a student at Auburn University, and he had been working at the Birmingham News as an intern reporter for the summer. He, along with veteran news photographer Jerry Ayers, grabbed their equipment and headed out in search of this suspect car. The hope was that they would locate the police, and then they could follow the police cruisers in their car to be able to get some good details as well as some photographs for the newspaper when the police actually found the vehicle. So something you have to realize about this incident, it occurred 40 years ago, okay? Like, we're talking 1979 here. Way before the time of cell phone use and any sort of technology that we rely on today for communication or for police dispatching. So basically, if someone from the public saw a suspect or a car on the interstate, calling the police to report the incident wasn't as easily as just, dialing 911 or their local police station from the comfort of their car. In order to do that, they had to pull over and find a payphone somewhere to make the call to police. So this created a definite delay from the time the suspect vehicle would have been seen, and then the time that it got reported to the police and called in. So then once that was done, the police dispatchers then had to go over the radio and dispatch the details of the most current location of the vehicle. But of course, by the time the police would then get there, the car was long gone. It had already driven past. It had already gone past the next exits and the next, So they just, they weren't having any luck. Oops, I just pulled the thread off my needle. Bear with me here. There we go. Okay. So, so the police had gone out. By the time they would get to wherever had been called in, the car was long gone. So they would continue to patrol and look for it, but they weren't having any luck. So Mark and Jerry spent several hours that morning driving back and forth the interstate, also not having any luck. The car they were driving in was equipped with a CB radio. So they could communicate with the newsroom, and they could do that without having to pull over and find a phone to call in. So Garland would be listening to the police radio. He would pick up any details in the newsroom, radio in the CB to the to Mark and Jerry in the car, give them some updates. So it was going back and forth that way with the information. So the police were still actively looking for the vehicle. And like Mark and Jerry, they weren't having much luck locating it. After about 3 hours of looking, just as Mark and Jerry were ready to give up, Mark spotted a beat-up beige 1974 Dodge car headed northbound on Interstate 59. In the opposite direction to what he and Jerry were traveling. Mark kept a close eye on the car as it passed by them, going in the opposite direction, because he was in the passenger seat and Jerry was actually the one driving. So the car was in the outside lane of the outside southbound lane, and the beige car, no, I got that backwards, sorry. So they were in the outside southbound lanes, and the beige Dodge was actually in the middle of the northbound lanes. Now I've got it right. So what they did was Jerry took the next exit ramp and he turned their car around, getting back on the highway in a northbound direction in an attempt to catch up with the vehicle. And as they got closer, sure enough, in a few minutes, they were behind this beige Dodge with a very clear view as they were following it on I-59. That's when they confirmed that this was in no way a prank. Very clearly, sticking out of the, poking out through a crack at the bottom of the trunk, they could see a human hand. And the fingers were wiggling and waving around. So the individual trapped inside the trunk was obviously still alive and trying to be seen. Like they were using they were using their hand to try and get noticed, I guess. So Mark communicated via the CB radio in the car to their editor, Garland Reeves, back at the news desk. Mark advised Garland that they had located the Dodge car. They were headed northbound on I-59 in the vicinity of Ainsley, traveling about 60 miles an hour, and asked Garland to call the police. So Jerry, at that point, being the veteran photographer that he was, he got Mark to hold the steering wheel of the car while he got his camera out and took several photographs of the vehicle with the hand very plainly in sight and clearly showing the license plate of the vehicle. Oops, I just put that stitch in the wrong spot. There we go. Okay. So he got a couple of pictures of the back of the vehicle, and they could very clearly see that there was a female a female driver, and there were two other male passengers inside the car. Again, no idea who was in the trunk. So the female took the I-59 off-ramp for Airport Boulevard. And Jerry and Mark took the same exit. And by this time now, the female driver noticed that she was being followed. So she started to speed up on the residential streets. Mark kept contact via the radio with Garland at the news desk and continued to update the police on their location. And then the police got information from their dispatch. So basically, they were getting minute-by-minute information now. So Mark would tell Garland on the radio. Garland was on the phone with a police dispatcher simultaneously and would give the dispatcher the location. And then the dispatcher would immediately radio the police officers. So they had a pretty good, the delay in getting the information to the officers was certainly much quicker. There wasn't much of a delay at this point. So they kept following this car, okay? The lady's driving. She's swerving in and out of residential streets. She's speeding up. But Jerry was determined not to lose this vehicle. They were hot on its tail, so to speak, in the middle of a residential neighborhood. They turned in and around several residential streets, and this went on for about 30 minutes until finally they turned into a narrow road, and they ended up having the suspect boxed in with Jerry and Mark's vehicle behind, and police cars showed up, and they were in front of the suspect car. So, needless to say, the news crew was relieved. And they had front row seats to everything that went on as the police officers swarmed the vehicle and arrested 3 people from this beige Dodge. They arrested the female driver. Her name was Robin Green. She was 24 years of age. They arrested one of the male passengers. His name is Joseph Fendley, and he was 27. And they also arrested his uncle, a Wilburn Fendley, who was 49. So with the suspects in custody, other officers approached the trunk and gingerly opened it, not really knowing what to expect inside. And when they opened it, it revealed a very disoriented and disheveled Gary Collier. So now I'm just going to tie off my thread here. You can see the back of my work there. Not too messy, considering it's a full coverage piece. And I'll just get a new piece of floss here. Thread my needle. Whoops. Now, when I start my stitches on the front, I start on my full coverage pieces with a pin stitch. I'm sure people have seen me do this before. I do have a tutorial, if anyone's interested, on my channel there of how I do a diagonal pin stitch over one. It just takes a second for me to get this anchored. There we go. And now I'm just going to cut off that little tail. There we go. Alrighty. So they go around to the back of the car and they find this poor, disheveled, very disoriented Gary Collier in the trunk. Gary climbed out of the trunk barefoot and injured, but he was very happy to have been saved. He thanked Mark and Jerry for finding the car and following until the police arrived. And one of the first things Gary asked for was a cigarette. And then he started relaying the details of what had actually been a 14-hour ordeal for him. And again, you know, just by stroke of luck that Mark and Jerry were on the spot. So there's, you know, there's photographs of when the car was found. There's photographs of Gary getting out of the trunk. There's actually a photograph of him walking around with the cigarette that he asked for as soon as he was let out of the trunk. Like, just so odd, right? So this 14-hour ordeal, Gary basically said that he had met Robin and Joseph at a bar in Bessemer the night before on Friday, May the 4th. So he didn't previously know these people. He had recently cashed his disability check, and he had gone to the bar to have a drink. And while he was there, he met these two suspects around 9 o'clock at night. So they didn't know him previously. They just struck up a conversation with him at the bar, and he just figured they were out for, you know, a good time as well. And Gary decided to have a few drinks with them. So they started drinking whiskey, but when Robin and Joseph started taking pills, Gary decided he didn't want to have anything to do with drugs. So he decided that he was going to leave. It was at this point that Robin demanded his money. And Gary handed it over because he said he felt threatened by them both. So once they robbed him, Joseph beat Gary up, and he's not sure which one, but one of them stabbed him with a screwdriver. And then they forced him into the trunk of the car. So thankfully, the stab wound wasn't too severe, and they thought they had killed him, but he actually spent the remainder of the night locked inside the trunk, being driven around, right? He says that he felt the car stop several times before starting up again, and said that at one point he decided to make his peace with God, thinking that the suspects had indeed intended to kill him. If they found out that he was still alive in the trunk, they surely would kill him once they went to take his body out and discovered he was still alive. He said he had overheard them at one point talking to another person about finding a place to dump his body. So Gary couldn't say at what point Joseph's uncle joined them. He was getting weak in the trunk and started to drift in and out of consciousness because he was in there for such a long time, and the carbon monoxide fumes in the trunk were making him drowsy, like they were causing him to pass out. So he also said that they had been driving so long that he feared that they weren't even in the same state anymore. But ironically, they were only 12 miles from the area where they had first met him in Bessemer. Now, I could be pronouncing all of these town names wrong. I'm not familiar with the area. I'm just saying the town names based on my English pronunciation. From what I know of the English language, anyway. So yeah, so they were only 12 miles from the area where they originally picked him up when they found him, even though he had been in the trunk for like 14 hours. So the suspects were charged with robbery, assault, and kidnapping. And they attended court for an arraignment, and the charges against the uncle, Wilburn Fendley, were dropped. Basically, the judge said that he had not been involved in committing the crimes and had merely, joined the group and gotten involved at some point after the fact. So they could not prove any malicious intent with respect to Wilburn. The other two, Robin Green and Joseph Fendley, they were officially charged and they did go to court, but I couldn't find out any more information regarding what the outcome of court was. If they had pled guilty and just been given sentences, or if they had pled not guilty and went to trial. I don't know what happened, and I couldn't find any information regarding their sentence. I mean, I did a lot of looking around at newspapers and trying to find information on court dockets, but I didn't get any luck in finding anything. And likewise, I couldn't find any follow-up information on Gary Collier, the victim. I know he was 35 years old at the time that this occurred, and there was mention in one article that I found that said he was from Midfield. I did find a record for a Gary Collier showing that he was born in February 6th of 1944, and this person died August 3rd of 1989, but there was no other details. So I don't know if it was actually, I'm pretty sure it might be the same Gary Collier, but I can't confirm that. Like, I don't have any way of confirming it. And I wondered if he might have been a Vietnam vet, if that was a possibility. Like, would that be the reason why He may have been receiving a disability check at the time of his abduction. You know, he was 35 years old. I know several vets during that era, you know, became disillusioned with government and kind of then fell off the radar once they returned from Vietnam. So I'm not sure if that might be him or not. Anyway, the young intern reporter, Mark Wynn, to this day, he's still a reporter. Once he participated in this story, he was bitten hard by the journalist bug. And he's been an investigative journalist ever since. He moved from print news to television. And today he works with WSB TV, Channel 2 in Atlanta. His coverage of a series of mail bombings, which also killed a federal judge as well as a civil rights attorney, led to him writing a book in 1995. The skilled photographer and the driver of the car, Jerry Ayers, well, I believe he continued work as a photographer until his retirement, but I couldn't really find much detail on his career and life after this particular incident. Well, I know that this has been a shorter episode than the last couple I've done, but I thought it was quite an unusual story and it deserved to be retold. If you've got any questions or comments about the episode, feel free to post them in the comments section. I really enjoy seeing your guys' reactions to the stories and having a dialogue with people about the incidents that occur and that I cover. I hope you, like I said, enjoyed the episode, even though it was a shorter one. Please feel free to give it a like and subscribe to my channel so you don't miss any upcoming content. I upload these coffee, crime, and craft videos every couple of weeks. Every once in a while I take a break due to a holiday, like a couple weeks ago we had Easter and I didn't upload at Easter time. If you want to help support my channel and the time it takes me to research and prepare each of these episodes, feel free to check out the Buy Me a Coffee option, which I have a link in my description box down below, because a coffee is always appreciated. Anyway, have a great week. Until next time, enjoy your crafting, stay safe, and I'll see you again soon.